welcome to another edition of Resonate with Edgehill and Davis. I'm Owen Edgehill.
And I'm David Davis.
Okay?
I'm good.
And we have a special guest today, a guy called Phil Auld. Hey, Phil? All right?
I'm fine, thanks. Yeah.
Good. Great. Good to have you in the studio.
Yeah, good to see you, Phil.
Not seen you in a long time. Just a brief with Phil, my connection with Phil. We did some workshops many years ago together. And as a result of those workshops, we built up a rapport in terms of getting on with each other quite well. So I just think it's really good that he's coming into the studio to ask a few questions in relation to our topic, which we're going to talk about in a second. So just before we get into the topic, Phil, do you want to just talk a bit about yourself and
when I was about 40 something, I decided I'd have enough of material life, as it were. So I gave up work and everything, got divorced, and moved into a Hare Krishna temple.
Right.
So I spent 3 years at a temple in this country, and then I went out to India, where we had to. My initial thing was managing a school, but then I decided I had enough of management, and so just stepped out of it all, but stayed in Vrindavan, which is a very good place for developing a spiritual life. And so with that comes along a load of other sort of qualities of being humble, being tolerant,
Right.
Not being affected by material things too much. So that
And does that shape you in terms of who you are today? Because I remember conversations that you and I used to have when we used to deliver the workshops. We'd start and talk about spiritual things and also end on a spiritual connection as well.
Yeah, of course it does. I mean, obviously there's different philosophies. Different people have worshipped God in different ways,
beliefs, yeah.
calling by different names. But ultimately, there can only be one God by the definition of God.
Mm-hmm.
So we're all, we may all be worshipping the same God, but calling him different names and worshipping in different ways.
Yeah.
So that was what I was doing in India. I think it made me a better person, and still am, and still does. I follow the basic principles. So. But then I ended up getting diagnosed with HIV.
Okay.
So.
And on that note, we've got a series of questions to ask you.
Yeah.
That you can impart with the audience, with relation to that. So let's get started on it. Do you want to ask the first question, Dee?
Yeah. I suppose for anyone, just briefly. I mean, HIV, which is what you were diagnosed with. Could you just very quickly explain what that is for those people that aren't aware?
Human immunodeficiency virus is basically HIV. The HIV in itself isn't a disease, but it's a virus that is transmitted in different ways, mainly through sexual relationships. And the virus, if they don't, back in the 80s and the 90s, they didn't have any effective treatment to deal with the virus. That's why people were ended up with AIDS. AIDS in itself isn't a disease as well.
Yeah.
It's
But it's definitely not the same thing.
no. But AIDS is acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. So it's not a disease in itself. But basically what it is, because the virus, hacks your immune deficiency, your immune ability.
Yeah.
You can't fight off like real simple, things like flu or
Common cold or whatever.
yeah.
So what's your journey been like, Phil? What's the journey been like having been diagnosed?
Well, I was in India at the time, which obviously there's no, I went to a hospital to get some other tests, and I sort of stacked HIV on the bottom. So he went and had your blood samples taken. Then about an hour later, you go back and get the report. So the report's just a sheet of paper, and on it it had HIV reactive, and I wasn't quite sure what reactive meant. So I asked, does that mean positive? They said, yeah.
Okay.
So, and then I stood there with this sort of, it didn't affect me too much immediately, but I thought I've got to do something about it. Can't. So anyway, I went home and I got on my laptop for 2 or 3 hours searching up, HIV and how it can be treated, and this, that, and the other. And after that, I realised that if I get proper treatment, it's not going to kill me. So because back then, this was 2012, and back then there were medications, effective medications that prevented the virus from replicating, and consequently, and it's the same today, but you can expect to live a pretty much normal and full life.
Yeah. But in relation to Dee's question, what's the journey been like for you since your diagnosis?
Okay, well, obviously up and down. You're having good times and bad times. Like, anyone has ups and downs.
Yeah.
But the downs may be a little more because the virus can affect different. It can do harm to different parts of the body before you actually start on treatment. Right. So I ended up with nerve damage, permanent nerve damage, in my feet, and my feet are sort of constantly pins and needles and like a numbness 24/7.
Right.
So it that's quite painful. And I take medication for it.
Right.
But then I had a thing where my father had dementia, quite bad dementia, and that affected me quite dramatically.
Yeah.
Because you go and see him and he wouldn't know who you were.
Yeah.
And you could go and see him the next day and he still wouldn't remember you from the day before. So it was very difficult to deal with.
Right.
But
and did that help you with your situation?
no, not really. It made it worse.
Right.
Because there were times also that I got affected by being dependent on taking tablets, 3 times a day or whatever.
Yeah.
But then, then I thought about it a bit more. But there's loads of people that take, their life is dependent on medication for all sorts of things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Blood pressure, there's that, heart issues.
Yeah.
So I sort of managed to get myself out of that. I did go and see a counsellor, but I was also doing counselling studies myself.
Right.
Okay.
And
that's helped you with your journey as a...
that really helped me.
Yeah.
That helped because there was I think a class of about 10 or 12 or something, and we all had issues over something or other.
Yeah.
And so it was quite a nice group because we ended up sharing all sorts of things. And I was reluctant at first to share, my
Your situation.
Yeah. But eventually, it was good. But that seeing that everyone else had all sorts of problems, not the same as mine, but
Various different problems.
but we still have to all try and fix it, sort it out, rise above it.
Right. Good. All right, Phil, my second question to you would be, how has your diagnosis affected your relationship with your family and friends and the community at large, would you say?
Well, that's one of the hardest things is to decide who to tell,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
because you don't know how they're going to react.
That's right.
You know,
Yeah.
like even family members. You know? So it's yeah, that was difficult. Who to tell? So that it did change the relationships with you know, with friends or with family relationships. But
Was that,
only
was that either the betterment or the detriment, would you say, in most cases, in your situation?
I mean, actually, most cases that it was all right. You know, they were sort of. I would say they sort of fully understood it, but they weren't. You know, they weren't sort of. Oh my God, he's got interest. No, not like that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Good.
Because people are frightened of it. That's
Because they don't know.
because they don't know.
Yeah.
You know, ignorance is the
You know, that's the root of most evil. Yeah.
exactly. So I mean, so yeah. Once you, I mean, and you can explain to people a little bit more about it.
Yeah.
And how to avoid getting it or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
So that's yeah, family, friends. The hardest thing, not even just with family or friends, but hardest thing is, you know, who to tell.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did that kind of affect, I suppose, and share this with the audience if you don't mind, please, but how did that affect your mental health in coping? Because that's a big thing at this particular moment.
Yeah, it sort of, you know, because it's like rebuilding all those relationships. You know, because you've got to try and think how they're going to react to it, and that puts a bit of pressure on you. You know.
Yeah.
And then as well, no doubt.
Well, them as well, but they don't know until you tell them.
Well, of course. But it's when you've told them.
When you tell them, I mean, most people I told were reasonably understanding. But same thing, if they don't know what it's, you know, what it is, how it's transmitted, how you can catch it, you know, all those sort of questions. If they're completely ignorant to that, then they're frightened of it.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Because the only thing they think of is the ads on the TV back to the 80s with the big slab of stone crashing down. And, you know,
Right.
I mean, you remember that?
Yeah,
Don't
indeed,
you
yeah.
remember it?
Right.
So that's sort of the impression people get of you know, HIV.
Which is a completely wrong impression, isn't it?
Totally, yeah, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, at the time, those ads were probably, you know, quite effective because it really did make people think about, you know,
Safe sex.
how they were having, sex.
Right.
You know. So, so you know, everything has its time and place.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah. So yeah, it can be difficult.
Yeah. Your question, Dean?
In relation to, I suppose, your motivation, what kind of keeps you hopeful?
Well, as I said before,
Having mentioned the
counselling really, the counselling studies really help.
and also being in a monastery with them as a monk.
Exactly, yeah. Because I mean, once something happened, you can't change it. You know, I've got HIV. I can't get rid of it. I can't. So I just got to try and make the most
It's how you deal with it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, and in one way, you're just pushing it to the side and getting on with life as best as you can. Or, you know, almost as if it's not an issue. It obviously is an issue, but you try to sort of do it, and that's easier for me as a you know, having done all my spiritual practices.
Yeah.
Because it I mean, from that I get a greater understanding of life and karma and all these sort of things that once you've had it, that's that. You know, you can't go back and turn it off. I mean, that's the same with all sorts of things in life.
Absolutely.
Once it's happened, that's that. You can't change it. And so the ultimate thing is trying to understand what you can and can't change,
Yeah.
and then deal with them appropriately one way or the other. You know?
Right.
I mean, you have choices.
Yeah.
We always have choices.
That's the key, isn't it?
And you can choose which way you want to react, which way you want to, do you want to be miserable and blame, or do you want to try and uplift yourself?
Yeah.
But as I said at the beginning, ups and downs,
Yeah.
There are times when you think, oh shit, I can't,
Right.
and even now sometimes, I wake up and I think, well, what am I going to get up for?
Right. Yeah.
So
Even
now, like, this is 13 years ago,
Yeah.
12 years ago.
But does that then take you back to your faith? When you think that, you go,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, and I get up for something. I mean, I've made a number of websites. One was, I ended up being involved in an HIV WhatsApp group in India.
Right.
Even though I wasn't in India anymore, but I knew somebody who had HIV. He was a young lad, and so he sort of introduced me to the WhatsApp group,
Right.
and I've been with it ever since. With the help of some of those, I built a website called posintouch.com, but it was at the beginning, the front page is, this guy stood on the top of a hill and all alone and nothing, and we wrote, "You're not alone."
Right.
The caption.
So that's one of the.
Which is so important to anything in life, isn't it?
It is, and
You clearly had a support group with the WhatsApp.
yeah.
You kind of reinvented yourself in relation to having a website.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that helps if you getting involved with other, and I guess also I got involved with Body Positive Dorset, which is a local charity that supports those living with and affected by HIV.
Right.
So I started doing a little bit of support work, and because you can help each other.
And doing that makes you feel better as well, Philip.
It does, definitely.
When
For me, I think helping people is important to me. Trying to impart some of my wisdom or knowledge or
as you're doing now. As you're doing now.
to others, like this now. It helps. It helps them. You can help people, and with Body Positive Dorset, it still helps. Now I'm a trustee, and I do that basically, day-to-day accounting.
Okay.
Send it all off to the accountant for finalising it.
So it just goes to show there are people out there to help. So you're definitely not alone, or your strapline, you're not alone.
So that was it now. That site was, you're not alone, because that's the first thing that everyone feels. They feel alone.
Feel alone, yeah. Interesting.
I guess it must be the same with other,
must be.
diseases.
That's my next question to you, Phil. I'm just conscious of time here.
Yeah.
What does a typical day look like for you? And how do you manage that with your health and well-being?
I don't like mornings.
Right.
Who does?
I don't like getting up early in the morning. I take the car for an MOT at like some ungodly hour of 8 o'clock in the morning. So
Change the garage.
I don't like mornings. Although
Is that down to, sorry to cut you, is that down to the medication that you're taking that you don't like mornings, or do you just don't like mornings, period?
Well, no, I mean, in India, I used to get up 3:30 in the morning.
Right.
Got the temple for service at 4 o'clock, 4:30, can't remember. Yeah, 4:30.
Yeah.
So, I was quite happy doing that.
Right.
But that, in a way, that was there for me to take part in. Whereas here, I don't have it.
Right.
But, so I don't like mornings nowadays. Although more recently, but more recently, I changed the time that I was taking my HIV meds. I used to take it at 9 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
So I get up, take the tablets, go and have a pee, and go back to bed.
Right.
So I thought, well, this is a bit dumb. So I changed it to 11 o'clock. And
Right.
so I get up, take the tablets, go for a pee, and then I wouldn't necessarily go back to bed.
Right.
So it's a bit more motivation to do things and to
Yeah.
get off your arse.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that's. I'm just looking at.
So what do you wish people would understand more about HIV? If you could kind of look into the camera and describe that to the audience, what would you wish them to understand?
Educate themselves. I mean, it's all about, we talked before, education, to understand how difficult, it's actually very difficult to get HIV. First of all, you have to have somebody who is HIV.
Right.
And I mean, if I slit my wrist now, the blood all over within seconds, the virus is dead.
Right.
So you can't get, you couldn't get it just like that. Okay. People think,
Oh, like I say, I was never aware of that, and I'm sure people out there.
I could get off a toilet seat, onto somebody HIV sat on we have a quiz on the website. Another one is that, well, if I sit next to somebody who's got HIV, I could get HIV. Or if we use the same cup they've used, or,
Right. All them are myths.
all those sort of, you have to have a route of transmission. In other words, some bodily fluid from the person who's HIV has to get into my bodily fluids
Right.
and my bloodstream.
Right.
That's not so easy to do,
Right.
So sex is obviously one way because the semen is contained within the body and it doesn't get out to and there's mucous membranes that absorb things into the bloodstream much easier than
So basically, as you say, if you cut yourself now and you were bleeding, I would also have to be bleeding.
you'd have to be bleeding. We'd have to rub it together.
Yeah.
Or even then, you're probably not likely to get it.
Right.
So the chances are
Chances of it.
Yeah.
The chances are sort of in normal day-to-day.
ceiling, yeah.
It's virtually impossible.
Interesting.
yeah.
Especially off the back of what you said, Phil, in terms of all those different things, like you can get it sitting next to people, you get it off a toilet seat and everything. In terms of the way you explained it, it has to be intravenous. It has to come through some kind of That's really good information. That the myth busting around it and
Well, the myth busting, is a good start,
yeah,
but it's education. So body positive, of course, one of our sort of roles is to educate.
right,
So we have a few classes at the university that we run an ongoing program with. Prisons, sexual health, for prisoners that are mean for sexual issues.
right.
Okay.
Prison. Portland. So
So you go into there and
Good talk to them.
right,
Good talks,
right,
what have you, and schools, colleges,
right, good,
things like Pride.
Yeah.
Talk to people. So because if they've got a better understanding, then that reduces the stigma.
of course, yeah,
Because stigma is it's not such a big deal as it probably was
In the 80s, yeah.
back in the 80s and 90s. But still, those people we call them long-term survivors, those that had HIV back in those days,
Yeah.
and somehow or other they're still here. They're the ones that sort of feel the stigma more than, like myself. I was only, diagnosed 12 years back. Or whatever.
Right.
So the only real stigma I faced was from a GP.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And talking about education, some of the medical practices, even nurses in the hospital, they got no idea.
Again, it's all down to awareness and lack of.
So it's like one thing that they used to do, double gloves. Plastic blue gloves. So they put 2 of them on each hand.
Right.
So it's totally.
Yeah. Uneducated. That's the word, isn't it?
And also, even now, another thing that we try and get across, it's slang with U equals U.
Yeah.
So the treatment, the medication you take reduces the HIV virus within your bloodstream and your body.
Okay.
It stops it replicating, and it gets down to a level where it's considered undetectable.
Right.
Which is below sort of, I think it's about 40 copies per, litre or whatever it is. So, if you're undetectable, you can't transmit it.
Right. Right.
It's been proved in various studies and what have you. So one of the ideas is to try and get, everybody being undetectable.
Can I ask just one last question?
Yeah, there's another question that you need to ask. We're still all right for time.
But this one last question, which isn't down on the list, which I think is so important for people, and I hope you don't mind me asking it, but what are your symptoms and what should people look out for if indeed they need to get a blood test for it?
Well, there aren't any, to be honest.
No symptoms.
I mean, at the very first point when you get it, you might experience some flu-like symptoms. And that's it.
And this is not to scare anyone that's got flu or flu, but
the thing to do is if you're having regular sex with lots of different partners,
Right.
then you should go and get tested.
Right. Okay.
Right.
Especially if it's unsafe sex,
Right.
if you're not using condoms, whatever, then you should go and get tested and do it on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
But there's now medications that you can take, it's called PrEP, pre something exposure,
Yeah.
So if you take that, you can either take it every day, and if somebody who's HIV positive has sex with you, then you're not likely to get it either.
Okay.
So it's like a preventative.
Yeah, Phil. So just picking up on that, on the testing side of it, that's what you would recommend.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's like if you test for anything, it's better to know than not to know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because if you know, then you will deal with it. If you don't know, then you're just going to carry on, maybe giving it to lots of other people.
Point. Yeah, that's a good point.
So, but you're talking about the symptoms, and as I said, that it might only be some sort of flu type thing. But I got the hospital down here in Bournemouth. They reckon that I had HIV for at least 3 years before I found out.
Right. As long as that.
And some people can go even longer than that.
Mm-hmm.
I was really quite ill. I ended up in hospital in Watford for a month. Anyway, but yeah, testing.
Testing is okay.
Testing, and if they're regularly doing use the PrEP treatment.
Excellent.
And that sort of that somebody is newly diagnosed, then obviously you've probably gone to the sexual health department to to deal with it. And
Yeah, so
they'll help you, and they'll give you advice, and they'll talk about medication and what have you.
So, and the important fact is there's no stigma to it, is there? No stigma in going to that medical centre and saying, listen, I want to be tested for HIV or whatever.
or whatever, yeah. Yeah, no stigma involved. Go and do it. Go and do it.
Well, something that's just started is that anyone going to hospital and in A&E or whatever, they'll get tested for HIV
Brilliant.
without they don't need to know about it.
Right.
And then obviously if somebody's positive, and they'll inform them and they'll put them in touch with we're doing it in conjunction with Terrace Higgins Trust. So the hospital or the Oshawa hospital will refer them to us
Right.
at Body Positive Dorset for help,
That's great.
support.
All right, Phil. Well, thank you for coming in and sharing your knowledge and your awareness around this particular subject. Really, really appreciate it. And hopefully you'll come in again and chat to us again. That'd be great.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. You need to say a few words, dear, as you usually do.
Yeah, well, just to reiterate with Early's words, thank you so much, because I think it's important that people are aware that HIV is out there, but HIV is something that people should be scared of. So just made the awareness known. I hope people enjoyed this episode with you. You've explained a great deal about it, and I thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'd just like people to kind of hopefully, if you can give us the link for your website, we can obviously introduce that and put that in on our page and in our link.
In our descriptions.
Because I think it's important that people kind of they've heard your story, they can continue to see your journey, and there's questions, as you say, on that website that you got.
Yeah, there's a quiz
So there's a quiz that people can take, and I think that's
20 questions.
excellent. That's terrific.
And we actually got the results. We can look at the results on, logging into the website.
And what do you do with those? Just briefly, what do
We
you
don't really do anything with them.
Okay, but
It's because it's anonymous,
yeah, okay. But it's not harm in taking that particular quiz.
But it's interesting. It may give us focus as to, if lots of people are getting the same question right, then that may be something we should focus on,
Great.
That's a great idea. Fantastic idea.
So
we'll share that within our link. All I'm going to ask you to do now, please, as always, is those 4 things. Please subscribe. Please share the video if you've liked this particular episode. If you have any comments, any questions, please share them. We can always get back to Phil and then answer those questions for you if we're not experts in any shape or form. And please subscribe to the channel. Please subscribe to keep this channel alive. Thank you so much.
great.
Thank you for seeing you.